Hey everybody, it's been a hot minute since I last posted, but I do have a valid excuse. I've been working on my biggest, most labor-intensive creation to date. Meet Lilith. We've been really busy and obviously, working and raising a child is a lot of work, so been hanging out with her and doing that, but I think now that it's summertime, it's time to get back to creating. So Lilith will be the inspiration for today's video, which is drawing proportions of babies. So let's get started. When we are working on drawing a baby, it's going to be quite a bit different than drawing an adult. So primarily it's going to be in the shape of the face and then the location of the features. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a square and I'm going to divide it into quarters. Now, if we were drawing an adult, I'd probably be working more from a rectangle instead of a square. So we're thinking about the head being quite a bit wider than we would with an adult, as kind of compared to the height. So I'm starting with not all the way over to the edges. Think about like the ears are going to be touching the edges over here. When we think about the top of the head is going to be quite a bit wider. Baby's got big old noggins, so we got to emphasize that. That is really one of the telltale features when we're talking about proportions. The face is going to be slightly thinner here, and there's not going to be like a ton of definition. Babies are very soft. They don't have a lot of like angles going on here, so still pretty round, still pretty soft. Usually there's kind of like a double chin happening here. There's a lot of extra fat on a baby, unless if they're underweight, but we're thinking about a shape roughly like this. So as we are working on our proportions, we want to think about dividing just this bottom quadrant. So all of the features are in this bottom half. An adult, the eyes sit at this halfway line, but on a baby, that is not the case. Again, they got a big head and a little face. So we're going to take this bottom quadrant and we're going to divide it into quarters. And that is going to kind of help us navigate where the different features fall. So we've got these different quadrants happening. And if we look at the first line is roughly where the bottom of the eye is going to fall. So this line is the bottom of the eyes. And then our faces, roughly still 5 eye widths apart. Obviously, like if you're working from a photo, the face gets flattened a little bit, so we aren't seeing like the sides of the face quite as much. So think about it as like out here is our 5, not the cheekbone area. So I'm going to roughly eyeball it. The bad proportion jokes, I know. I still have them. That part of me never went away. Remember, you can use your pencil to measure. There isn't like an exact perfect measurement here. It's just in proportion with itself. Okay, so we have our 5 eye widths, and then remember this line, number 1, is the bottom of the eye. So I'm just going to draw a quick little eye shape here. A fun fact about babies is their eyes appear so big on their faces because their irises are already fully developed. So they are the same size as an adult iris, which makes their eyes look really, really big. So when you're drawing a baby's eyes, you're going to notice that the iris takes up a lot of space inside of the eye. So you're not going to see as much of the white of the eye as you would on an adult. And that is primarily just due to that nature that the iris is already fully developed. So, fun fact, interesting thing, our eyebrows are around that halfway line. So, you know, some babies don't have eyebrows really, but some do, so we'll just lightly block that in. Then as we move down, if I were to draw the little dotted line straight down from the middle of the eyes, the nose, same as on an adult, it is one eye width wide. So if we follow that, the nose is going to be at our halfway, so between this bottom quadrant here, it is at the halfway line. Now, another fun fact about babies' noses, they are pretty much always upturned. They don't really have a lot of cartilage at all in them yet. They're very, very squishy, and that is so that they can breathe when they're nursing. So extra squishy noses. Not a lot of definition happening there yet, so not really much shape change depending on the type of baby. Like, you know, everybody's nose shapes are pretty different, but babies' noses relatively similar. Like, they are just squishy little blobs at this point. All right, then the mouth is not quite much larger than the nose, so maybe it comes out just a little bit further than the nose. The number 3 line here is not quite the middle of the mouth, it's not quite the bottom of the mouth, so it's kind of in the middle of the bottom lip. So we've got like the upper, or like the crease between the lips right here, and then that lower lip. Lots of babies tend to have like a very bowed lip on the tops and bottoms at this age. And then when we get to the ears are a bit lower than on an adult. So on an adult, normally it's like eyebrows and bottom of the nose. On the baby, it's about the, I don't know, top of the eye to the top of the mouth. So slightly lower than we would see on an adult. That ear tends to stick out some. So that's getting us kind of to the edge of the box that we have out here. From here we can add in hair, so obviously everybody's hair is going to look different, but roughly that hairline is about halfway in this quadrant, maybe a little bit higher, just depending on the hairline and how much hair the baby has. You know, it could be just very little wispies. They could have a full head of hair. So that would be our basic proportions of a baby facing forward. As we're going from a profile, we're going to work the same. So we're going to have another box divided into quadrants. And when we are working with the box here, the tip of the nose is going to be at one end, and then the back of the head is going to be at the other end. That's roughly how we're working here. Similarly to how we worked here, we're going to divide this bottom box into quadrants. So all of our features are going to be happening in this bottom box here. So as I'm working on the shape of the head, generally the head sticks out the furthest, kind of in the, I don't know, bottom half quadrant around here. The curve of the neck is roughly halfway on this line. If I were to continue that quadrant here, we still got a bit of the bottom of the head here before the neck happens. And then as we get to the face, one thing that's really important to notice when we are talking about the profile of a baby is, again, they're very soft. They don't really have angles, so to speak. So the curve from the forehead to the nose is very gentle. The tip of the nose is going to be in between the first and second lines here. So the second line is like the base of the nose, right at the bottom. And then we have kind of like the tip of the nose curving upwards. So we've got a really nice gentle slope from the forehead to the tip of the nose. We have that like little upturned nose like we were talking about here. All right, then between 2 and 3 we have the mouth again. So remember 3 is about in between the middle of the mouth and the bottom lip. So as we're working here, think about kind of like an angle going down. So our upper lip is going to jut out further than the lower lip. Again, it's still pretty soft. The lower lip doesn't come out quite so far. And then the chin kind of follows that same angle moving downwards. And then having kind of those softer cheeks too, getting the line there is going to help create that sort of plumpness. Soft edges on the nostrils. And then as we're working on adding in the eye and the remaining features, think about, there's like just a gentle angle here going up from the nose, kind of parallel to the side of the face here. That's going to help us kind of figure out where the eye fits. So we don't want the eye too close to this point. We need some breathing space here. And then the bottom of the eye falls at this number 1 line. And it's about halfway up. And then we have our brows in this place, if there are any. We're going to have kind of a show some of the fat under the chin here. And then the ear, again, roughly the top of the eye to the top of the mouth. So if we draw a little line across here, the ear also needs to be kind of at an angle. And then from this point, we'll just kind of refine and shape the head, maybe add hair. So there we have kind of our basic proportions of a baby. So again, if we take this first quadrant, at line 1, it's the bottom of the eyes. Line 2 is bottom of nose. And then line 3 is kind of in between the middle and bottom lip. Our ears are going to hang out top of eye to the top of the lip. And then generally our hairline might be at the halfway of this top quadrant, maybe a little bit higher. So those are going to be our basic facial proportions. We could put this into action using a photograph if you wanted to map it out before drawing. That's always a great idea. Otherwise, that would be your rules of thumb as you are working on changing proportions from adult to a baby. Thanks for watching and keep creating.